What's up everybody, welcome to this review of King Richard, the 2021 film starring Will Smith as Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams, the famous pro tennis players. And that's kind of the setup of this story. He is their father, he is their coach, he's training them to be the best they possibly can be. This is a drama biopic in a very traditional sense. That's both a good and a bad thing in certain ways. I'll get into that in just a bit. Overall though, King Richard, what did I think of this film? This is one of the best films this year. Yeah, I think you're going to be seeing a lot of people talking about this film come Oscar season. I think this is going to be one of the biggest, most talked about films of the year in terms of awards, in terms of how good it is and recognition. Primarily because of Will Smith. So, we'll go into some of the nitpicky points I've got about it later on, but let's get into the story. This is a traditional biopic in many ways. It's got the very traditional formula, a rags to riches story, and that's probably one of the negatives about it, but I will say that it absolutely nails it. It does all of the beats and that you're familiar with. It shows you the harsh upbringing, the harsh beginnings of their life, and then they start to gradually get better and better off in terms of their wealth and well-being. They get better clothes, better cars, better house, and so on. And yeah, it's actually kind of a feel-good film as well, because you never feel like these people don't deserve what's happening. This isn't a rags to riches story in the sense that, hey, these people are going on a bad journey, they're doing bad things, but the success is speaking for itself. It's not like that. These people are generally good people, according to the film at least, and that's kind of fresh for a biopic. So yeah, there are some darker moments in here, particularly towards the beginning when they are living in like the gang territories and there's hoodlums and people aren't quite as nice as, well, what you would want. But yeah, it does nail the formula, but it is a formula that we've seen before in dozens of other biopics. But the story is constantly building upon itself as well. There's a lot of foreshadowing. There are certain things that I mentioned earlier on, which then become key lines that spark like hype and momentum later on. The film does a really good job of building excitement, building the momentum. It's got a pretty good pacing throughout it, in that it does go up and down gradually. It doesn't like suddenly drop. My attention never went to rock bottom and had to build up again. It's really good that way on. The direction's good that way on as well. And of course, it's got social commentary in there. There's good themes and messages as well. The fact that it is set in the early 90s, right around the time of the LA riots, and of course the NWA rising up and hip hop and rap music coming into fashion, and all that's happening in the backdrop. You see how it's impacting these characters, you see how it impacts their lives and what they're doing, the decisions that they're making. And of course, being in 2021 now, it's eye-opening that some of that stuff is still very relevant to what's happening now. So it's really good social commentary. But the film is a drama. There are some emotional moments in there, there are some big dramatic moments in there. At times it kind of feels a bit like a soap opera, but it never goes into like the cheesy soap opera area. There are some little comedic moments here and there, and they work really well. They feel very natural. It's not comedy just for the sake of the audience. It feels like these characters are just making little jokes that are very real and believable in the real world, as you would to one another. So let's get into one of the nitpicks in terms of the story, in that it is about tennis stars. I don't think you need to be a fan of tennis to watch this film. I'm not a fan of tennis whatsoever, and I found this film quite insightful, quite eye-opening in terms of how the tennis world works. But there is a reliance on tennis towards the back end of the film, and it's not bad by any means, but I did find my attention waning a bit because I'm not interested in tennis. I don't like tennis. So having to sit through quite a few sequences of tennis matches was not the most entertaining thing about this film. I do think some of it could have been trimmed down. Obviously it's a film, so it's all dramatized and stuff like that. It is amped up in terms of the excitement and thrills. It's not a real life tennis match. It's a film version of a tennis match, so it is a bit more entertaining than your typical tennis match, I would say. But again, there's just a little too much, and I'm really getting nitpicky. It is just a little too much. I would have trimmed it down to really just focus on the characters a bit more rather than the tennis and the game and the sport. But yeah, you don't need to know anything about tennis to like this film, although it probably will help. And last thing we're going to talk about the story is the focus of the story. It's on the father of Serena and Venus Williams. Serena and Venus Williams, arguably two of the most popular, famous, well-known tennis players ever. I don't even think it's arguable, to be honest. I think they are up there as one of the most popular, famous people ever. But this film's not so much about them, it's about their father, who I didn't realize was such an important figure in the world of tennis. Obviously, he's very important to them as their father, but I think it's actually a really smart idea to focus the biopic on him rather than the daughters, on the stars, because he really is the instrument that developed them. He is the one that was training them and coaching them and building them up and promising them things. It's just as much about his commitment, his dedication and his role in their lives as it is about them succeeding as tennis players. So I really thought it was quite good to have a little bit of a twist on the biopic in that, yeah, it is kind of about Venus and Serena, but it's actually much more about him. And speaking of him, Will Smith. This is probably the most acclaimed thing about this film. Will Smith's performance is absolutely fantastic. Will Smith, I think, is a good actor overall, but so many of his films he is just a hyper-exaggerated version of himself. He's a funny guy, let's face it. He does these action roles, he does these comedic roles. This time though, he is not playing Will Smith whatsoever. He is very much a character here. He's adjusted his voice and his mannerisms, his way of speaking. He's got a bit of a hunch. He kind of hobbles around a bit on his feet. There's a mention earlier on in the film how he's got bad feet, so he adjusts the way he walks. He's adjusting both the way he looks, the way he walks, the way he moves, the way he talks. He very much is diving into this character, and at a certain point you stop thinking that's Will Smith. It's really, really good. He is going to get an Oscar nomination for this performance, or at least he very well should do. And honestly, I could be here all day listing off all the different actors and characters in this film, because the acting across the board is great. Venus and Serena Williams, two actors I'm not entirely familiar with. They are really well cast. They are child actors, I believe. I don't know how old they actually are. They're probably older than I think, to be honest, knowing how films are made, but they're really good. You get to the sense that they are a real believable family, and the family dynamic between all these characters is really well developed. You get the sense that the mother is a bit more relaxed with them and wants them to enjoy life as much as focus on the tennis. The father's a bit more strict. He's got a bit more conservative views on certain things. He's very protective of his daughters. The daughters, however, there are 5 of them altogether, including Venus and Serena. They all live together, they all have friendships together. The family bond and dynamic is just really well developed. Everything about the characters feels real and believable. And branching out though, you've got all these side characters. You've got some significant names and stars and faces popping up here for like one scene. And a little disappointing that you get the likes of Dylan McDermott showing up, who I'm a big fan of Dylan McDermott, but he shows up and he has like one line of dialogue and then he's gone. So a little disappointing, but hey, he brings that character to life. Then you've got people like Kevin Dunn showing up as well. Same thing, got like 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, done. It's interesting casting these like familiar names and faces for just one scene. The other main like side character I want to really talk about though is Jon Bernthal. So Jon Bernthal, probably at this point best known for playing tough guys and no-nonsense guys, guys with an attitude, particularly The Punisher. That's probably his most famous role. So he shows up as a tennis coach here, and he is a bit like Will Smith, but not to the same extent because he is a side character, but he's kind of reinvented himself. He's playing against type here. He is not a no-nonsense tough guy. Yeah, he's a tennis coach and he is a bit bossy, he is a bit shouty at times, but he's changed his look. He's got a mustache, he's got longer hair, and he's even changed his voice. He's very much more softer speaking and much more friendly and nice. And perhaps that's saying more about the circumstances that he's in, but I really liked his performance because this is Jon Bernthal showing the range of his performances here. He doesn't just play these big tough ass hard as nails guys. But overall, what I like about this film is the way in which it shows each of the characters' motivations and goals. From Will Smith to his daughters, to his wife, to the neighbour across the street who keeps pestering them and harassing them, to Jon Bernthal's character. They've all got their clear goals and motivations. They're all given this personal identity, and that's credit to both the writing and the directing, the fact that they have put this dedication into each and every single character. And of course, like, the acting helps as well. The fact that the acting across the board is great, like I said. But you really do strive and relate to every single person's point of view at certain points. Maybe not so much the neighbour, that neighbor can go to hell. But yeah, but there's a lot of arguments to be made, a lot of different points to be made, because it's so well, it does a great job at showing the different viewpoints, the different aspects of each of the arguments and debates and issues in the film, because each character has a different viewpoint. So it's really well done that way on. In terms of production, just to wrap all this up, I already said it's well directed, the visuals are gorgeous, they've got a really good colour palette, you feel like this is LA. I'm sure it was probably filmed on location to some extent, but they go from LA to Florida at certain points, and each one has a different colour palette, a different seeming look. Again, maybe the locations help that much more, but you get a sense that this is hot and sweaty LA and things are a bit downtrodden there, and then everything's a bit brighter and a bit more relaxed and fresh in Florida when they get there, and that's all because of the colour and the use of cinematography. There's some good shots in there. It's not by any means like a film known for its use of cinematography. It's not showing you these huge landscapes and vistas and gorgeous environments so much. It is very much down on the deck, in the ground, in amongst the people kind of thing. So it's not here to make like the most artistically stunning visuals you've ever seen, but it does do a good job with going to the ground level of it. But in terms of pacing and length, this is again me getting very nitpicky, because I have to in terms of this film. The pacing, there are moments where things slow down a bit, there are things where I maybe would have trimmed things down. As I've mentioned, the tennis matches towards the back end of the film, you do have to have some interest in tennis, I think, to sit through some of the longer tennis sequences in the film, and the tennis sequences aren't that long. This really is maybe nitpicky, I want to highlight that a lot. So the pacing is pretty good throughout the whole film. There's not a moment where I lost a huge amount of interest, except for some of the tennis stuff, because I'm not a tennis fan. And the length of the film, it is on the longer side, it's about 2 hours 20 minutes. Again, maybe cut out some of the tennis stuff and you could tone it down a bit. Maybe some of the earlier stuff as well is a bit dragged out. You don't need all of that backstory stuff maybe. Arguably, I don't know. Again, nitpicky, just trying to come up with something that's negative about this film. But of course it's a period piece as well, it's set in the early 90s, so they've got all the clothes, the sponsorships, the Reebok tracksuits, the short shorts and stuff like that. It's all really paying homage and attention to the detail of the 90s, the clothes, the props, the sets, the locations. You really get a sense that this is a time period, and they've done a really good job of establishing that time period, the look and feel of it. But the last thing I want to talk about is the soundtrack and the score. This was a bit disappointing. It's not that the soundtrack and score is bad, it's just I honestly couldn't tell you anything about the soundtrack or the score. It kind of just blended into the background, so arguably that's a good thing, but I don't think any of the stuff was popping, I don't think any of the stuff was highlighting, I don't think any of the stuff was enhancing what was going on the screen. I never really noticed the soundtrack at all, but at the same time, I didn't notice any of it was bad, I didn't notice anything was distracting, so the soundtrack, perfectly fine, just nothing to call home about. And that is King Richard in a nutshell. I like this film quite a bit. This is going to be one of my favourite films of the year. I do think it's one of the best films of the year. I do think Will Smith's going to get an Oscar nomination. I think the film might even get an Oscar nomination. And I do think it's one you want to check out. It is on the longer side, 2 hours 20, but it's really interesting. There are moments when I think it relies a little too much on having some sort of interest in tennis, but it's not entirely necessary. So you can totally go in here not knowing who Venus and Serena Williams are, not having any interest at all in tennis, and you will walk out enjoying the film, just like I did, I think. And if you've liked this review, why not subscribe to my channel to get more content like this, and follow me at _Graham Burton on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time though, thanks for watching.